You make the good point. I think I agree with you that Indonesia's defense capabilities are underdeveloped. Just about a week ago, though, Prabowo Subianto, Indonesia's defense minister and also front runner for the presidential elections next year, did a trip to the U.S. and signed a deal, a big one, for a whole bunch of Boeing F-15 fighter jets. And that was on the back of, right after signing a deal for French Rafale fighters as well, 42 of them. I mean, he's spending a heck of a lot of money. I mean, are these just vanity projects?
It is certainly the case that under his term, Indonesia has been buying a lot more of expensive platforms such as the F-15. That's not the only one. We'll have more in the pipeline. The challenge, I think, is not necessarily the hardware that Indonesia is going to acquire. There's also resource challenge, how likely it is for us to be able to afford to pay for all of that over the next decade or so, but it's also interoperability. Indonesia has the most number of foreign arms supplier in Southeast Asia. There are 33 countries. So issues of interoperability, doctrinal changes, institutional readiness, these are all things that we haven't quite figured out. So while it is a step in the right direction that there's more hardware coming our way, Indonesian military still has a way to go in terms of improving overall force capability.
Now, here's what could be a sensitive question, but I know you're outside Indonesia, Jakarta, so I'll leave you to navigate through this. Prabowo, obviously, former general, special forces. Most of us know his background and history. If he does become president, what do we know about his thinking, his leanings with regards to U.S.-China?
I think it's certainly the case if we look at public statements and speeches that he has given, whether it's at our own Shangri-La Dialogue 2 years in a row or in other venues, he does seem to try to navigate at least the U.S.-China competition as best as he could. In last year's Shangri-La Dialogue, for example, he mentioned that both U.S. and China are good friends of Indonesia. But of course, in reality, I think when it comes to defense capabilities, in terms of education, hardware, training, and so forth, we are certainly very much more aligned in terms of cooperation with the United States and not with China. But economically, we are certainly much more aligned with China. So I think this is a line that even President Prabowo would have to navigate, and he cannot overturn those structural features in the relationship overnight as well.
Evan, does it feel, though, that on balance, Southeast Asia is moving and gravitating once more into the orbit of the US as opposed to China, especially when you consider the example of the Philippines?
I guess that depends on how you define alignment within the U.S. orbit. What I would argue is that for Southeast Asia, I think the region remains divided in the sense that each country have their own strategic calculus. Philippines, because of what's happening in the South China Sea, is certainly much more willing to exercise its alliance with the United States to a higher level under President Marcos. But other countries like Cambodia are still very much closely aligned with China. So I think what we are seeing in the South China Sea remains a balance between anxiety of great power competition on the one hand, but also the ability to exploit U.S.-China competition to their own strategic benefit.